Welcome to the CMO Chapter podcast, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of Chief Marketing Officers. Join us as we explore the careers, insights, and strategies of top marketing executives who shape the brands we know and love. Whether you're a seasoned marketer, aspiring CMO, or simply just curious to understand what it really takes to step into the shoes of a CMO. This podcast is your backstage pass to discovering what it's like to really lead and innovate in the ever-evolving landscape of business. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of the visionaries behind the brand. I am absolutely delighted. Thank you, the wonderful Penny Elmslie, for joining me this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Oh, pleasure. So Penny, I am so excited. We've got a lot to unpack, lots of different chapters throughout your career to discuss. Before we get into it, can you please give us a brief kind of quick intro of who you are and what you're doing?
Okay. Well, I am currently the CMO of Affinda, which is one of Australia's fastest growing AI firms. We focus predominantly on AI tools for business. So it's been a really interesting 18 months and I'm sort of loving the opportunity. Prior to Affinda, I was at Xero for 10 years, which was the biggest sort of chapter of my career. But I have been in tech marketing, I'd say about sort of 18 to 20 years now, makes me feel old. But yeah, I've sort of seen a lot in that 20 odd years, but I've been in marketing and sales my whole life.
Yeah, excellent. So as I said, there's quite a bit to unpack, but we're going to start fairly early on in the early career days. So I'm going to ask, what originally drew you to marketing in the first place?
Well, it's actually an interesting story because I did a communications degree and I sort of, graduated in the middle of a recession. And so went overseas, like, Australians do. Came back and my first job was actually in media sales. So I just took a job, started in my early 20s. And I was, working, selling advertising at Channel 10 and then in radio. And I was working with marketers. And I recognized that what I wanted to do was actually have their job. So I wanted to be on the other side of the table. So at the time when I went, I tried to sort of, cross the bridge into that area. One of the things that those people said is you need a certification. You need some other additional qualification. So I went back to uni in my mid-20s and did a postgrad in marketing. I had a comms degree, so then I did a marketing degree. So then I crossed the bridge back into marketing when I was about 27, 28. And yeah, that was the start of it.
That was it. Okay, and here you are. So I guess, and this is a question I've asked a few people, but at the start of your career, what did you think marketing was going to be versus how, I guess, it landed?
Oh my goodness. It certainly wasn't what it turned out to be, that's for sure. I honestly thought marketing was, I don't know, creating pretty pictures and, doing creative things and, being at events and things like that. I mean, I must say I was pretty naive coming out of coming out of uni and sort of my first roles. I knew it had a campaigning element and things like that. I started my career in marketing in small businesses, so I've had a really sort of broad breadth of experience, which in hindsight was one of the best things that foundations, I think, because I was working on events, strategy, campaigns, the very early days of, e-marketing, which was then digital marketing. And what I recognized is that it's actually project management. It's just essentially, having a really clear idea or a brief, setting out what you need to achieve with metrics, etc., executing it, learning from it, repeat. So I'd sort of say in hindsight, marketing for me is just strong organizational project management, clear, business metrics, etc. And the creativity is always there. I mean, that's just who we are. But it's much more business orientated than I ever imagined.
And I can imagine as well, throughout your career, I mean, you've been in some pretty large roles and it gets to the point, I mean, I've had this myself, the more senior you get, you feel like you're further removed from the actual action. And, it just changes, doesn't it, behind the scenes? A lot more strategic,
Yeah.
commercial. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to get to a massive chapter within your career. So 2013, you joined Xero. So how did that happen? Were you headhunted, or was that through a network, or?
Um, Sort of. I worked for a small tech scale up in Melbourne, and one of my previous colleagues put my name forward to the Xero MD at the time. And at that time, no, I hadn't heard of Xero. No one had heard of Xero. And this friend reached out and said, "Look, they're setting up the marketing function outside of New Zealand, which is where New Zealand's origin. Xero's origin. And I think you should put your hat in the ring." And I was like, "Okay, well, is it a photocopy company? What's the story?" I knew nothing about it. And so, but what I did do is I literally Googled it, and I came across the most gorgeous video. And it was like this 2-3 minute video story around, it's called the Treehouse video. And it was an accountant dealing with a small business owner in the cloud, us in the tree. And it was just really quirky and just creative and quite beautiful. And I went, "Who are these people? I need to go and, at least talk to them." So then I had the conversation with Chris Ridd, who was the MD at the time, and he was pulling together the leadership team. And he was an ex-Microsoft guy, just a really, decent, good guy.
Yeah.
And I went, "I don't care what the job is. As long as I get to work in this environment with these people, I'm in."
Yeah.
And so it was a real leap of faith because there was one or two marketers, floating around. They weren't really doing marketing. The leadership team was, 3 or 4 of us at the time. I think I was employee number 56 in Australia at the time. So, it was really scrappy. And yeah, that's how it began. So it was a bit random, but also wonderful.
Absolutely. Because I feel, and I mean, you tell me, but when I, look back at your career, I mean, that would have been a massive, massive key milestone because, what Xero then became was just absolutely ginormous, huge, and back then I wouldn't have known Xero really, but you were the first regional marketing director to be hired. And then fast forward, you then became the global GM across brand. And so I'm going to ask you a bit of a question here. What was harder, starting it from scratch in Australia or growing it at scale?
Do you know what? I think in the early days, we had nothing to lose, everything to gain, nothing to lose. We were so united and we were so in the trenches together that it was just fun and wild. And we had permission, just to sort of think differently, be the challenger brand, but with that sort of Kiwi quirkiness. So although it was like relentless, I remember my first gig was the board. I hadn't even started the job, and the board had released some budget to do their very first advertising campaign. And I was like, "Okay, fine. Where's the brand style guide? Where's this? Where's that?" We had nothing. We had no data points. We had absolutely nothing. So I had to pull off a campaign in 9 weeks, get it on, we didn't do TVC at the time, but, radio, digital, outdoor, etc., with no agency, no nothing. And I look back on that now and I go, that was crazy, but it was fun. When I moved into the global GM role, that was a transition. I think we're about 2,500 people globally. And we had a new CEO who was like, "Right, we have to have a matrix organization where we work across regions, learn from what we're all doing, build playbooks that are common across the regions." And I think that I was really up for that challenge because I'd been in region for a long time, 5 years, and I could see how I could take these playbooks and make them into global playbooks. So I could see the opportunity. I was already frustrated that there were great things happening in other regions that I couldn't access. So that was also a sort of an opportunity to put, influence what I could see was an opportunity. It was harder though, because stakeholder management was quite intense. global time zones, just literally UK, Singapore, New Zealand, you're on the opposite side of the world. A lot of nuances across the regions, egos. And, that was just a thing. But on the whole, it was also exciting because we went from 3,000 to 5,000 in that time. So the hockey stick growth was really flying by that point.
Yeah. I think it's, and look, I'm sure, I mean, there'll be a lot of people listening to this that, perhaps in their own careers, maybe you're going through something similar at the moment where it's like, oh, thank God I took a punt on this business because we're now really going places. And I feel like, I mean, you landed on something that no one really knew about and it just became massive, and you were a massive part to play in that. I mean, fantastic from your career point as well.
Yeah, look, without a doubt, it was one of the greatest chapters. But it's interesting, when I left Xero, I thought about, and I spent some time working with a business coach and really sort of took some time back to reflect on what did I want to do next.
Yeah.
And I recognized scale up stage, those early days, was the time I loved the most, and the time probably my skill set and my curiosity, etc., was really at its high. So that's what I went looking for again, was scale up, not start up, scale up. And I found that at Affinda, where I could I recognized all these key elements that I'd seen before. So it's, like everything, it's different, but there's a lot of common things that I went, yes.
Love it. I mean, I always enjoy chatting to you because I always think, God, what an amazing ride journey, throughout that period of time as well. I mean, some of the stuff you've shared with me, I mean, I'm sure you mentioned that you had like a giant ice cube at one point with like Xero. And I mean, I remember this story and just thinking, oh my God, but big budgets to do some awesome stuff.
Well, surprisingly, our budgets were, they were reasonable, but they were nothing like some of our competitors. I think I remember there was one, we made this massive ball pit at a conference, and it was like the IKEA ball pit, where you go and you jump in the balls and everything, but we made a pool of it. And so, and think about the photos of, this is at one of the Xero cons up in Brisbane, this one. And we built this pool around it with lifeguards and, deck beds, a bit like the Ivy in Sydney. And everyone's jumping in the pool. They actually thought they were jumping, and I was like, it's not that deep. It's really only up to your waist.
Yeah.
But all the photos of people, in the ball pit was pretty cool. We had some fun. And there was, what was some other ones we did? I mean, we had this really random one called Cloud Street. And it was a shipping container, glass through the sides. And it's sort of at the start of when pop-ups were becoming a thing. And so we were like, we actually had this idea of Cloud Street where we had a shop, and every night we would go and swap it out with a new small business, because that was always our mantra, put the business first, that. So then we were like, this is a good idea, but it's really restricted to the location where the shop is. So let's take it on the road. So we bought this shipping container that packs down like Lego, and we'd take it up and do the Australian East Coast, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, pop it up, you turn up in Fed Square or Circular Quay, and then we'd host a small business. They would be selling out of this, pop-up shop. So we did that for a few years. It was sort of hilarious. But also I got in trouble because we'd bought a shipping container, and people are like, why the Xero on a shipping container? I was like, oh, don't worry about it.
There's method behind the madness. It'll work.
Someone might still, be paying some CapEx expense for this glass shipping container. That's right.
Love it. Love it. I mean, and there's some great stuff there, obviously, to talk about. But, has there been any... And look, if you're okay and comfortable to share, but has there been any failures that you sort of, look, none of us are perfect. And, I think you can speak to the best CMO in the world. And, we all learn from the mistakes and the failures. And, I like to think most of us learn. What have you learned the most? And is there anything that you think would be great to share that others could benefit from?
Yeah, look, of course, there were failures all along, and I think you actually learn more from the failures than you do from the successes. Yeah. I would say there's no such thing as a bad idea. It's timing. So I think like marketers, creative marketers, they're always sort of thinking and pushing and what about this, what about that? And there are some amazing ideas, but you really need to think around the right time to execute that idea. And there are times as well when you need to let that idea go. And look, Cloud Street was a good example of that because it was a great idea. It got lots of social amplification. It ticked that sort of box of getting, all the PR wins and embracing the customer. But when there was a point where I looked at the team resourcing and I'm like, I am overcorrecting now on this activate. I'm dragging people out of the office, up and down the east coast of Australia, where reality is we could have used that resourcing a lot tighter back in, working on more scalable activities. So the timing for that activation was right. I probably let it go for an extra year than it should have. And there was a point where, and it was a little bit of an emotional thing because I loved that idea, but it was time to let it go.
Yeah.
There were other things like we used to do lots of different types of events. And honestly, I have no regrets trying things, but occasionally we would, bring out a speaker and it just didn't land. And you just have to go, you know what, it didn't work. Yeah, okay with it. So that was fine. And then you'd have other ones. We had this one guy and he was a Buddhist monk, Dan DePani, slightly, New York, interesting, maybe a little bit off. And anyway, we had him as a speaker. It was a little bit random. And he came on the stage and he's sitting down, this is an accounting conference, and he's sitting down, doing on his bench, doing his Buddha thing. And I was like, how's this going to go down? Anyway, the room, 2,000 people, they were just captivated by this guy. It helped that he was good looking. And they were totally captivated by him. And they were just like going, where am I? I'm at an accounting conference and I'm watching a Buddhist monk doing some meditation in the middle of a massive stage. And anyway, so I was like, okay, this is going to go up, good or bad. Yeah. And anyway, great success. But what was amazing about it, and I didn't realize this for a year or two, is that we ended up putting it on YouTube. The whole length of the session, really sort of someone just threw it up. They didn't think about it. But it hit like 8 million views. And we were like, what? What's going on? So we went back and cut it into chapters and it became still one of the highest rating videos that Xero's ever put out is the Buddhist monk on the XeroCon stage. Go figure.
Wow, I love it. But also, I mean, you so wouldn't expect that, you're being disruptive, you're bringing something to an audience that probably they didn't expect that either. And guess what? It landed. You know what? We're all human. We probably don't mind staring at a really good looking monk. So
absolutely. And I think that's actually what I have learned the most. I mean, like we play in the B2B space, or I do. People are very rigid around, I'm B2C, I'm B2B, I work in FMCG, every acronym you can think of. But the reality is we are marketing to humans. We are marketing to a decision maker in that business that is a human with emotions, with, experiences, etc. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the years is treat people like humans. Yeah. Treat them with respect of where they're at, how they feel, what their pain points are. As soon as you start sort of like cutting out the academic or the business part of it, you instantly resonates with them. And I saw that at Xero particularly was accountants were like, oh, accountants, they're so boring. Accountants are crazy. I mean, I've seen accountants like crowd surfing, like they are crazy, smart, interesting, entrepreneurial people. And I think that Xero had the moment where we actually just recognise them as smart, entrepreneurial people and they went in like no other. Mm-hmm. The playbook now is like everyone does it. Yeah. So I don't think it's that different now, but I think Xero, we were given the permission to be a challenger and we were given the permission to like treat people like, like normal people. And I think that was actually the turning point of why the brand really, was loved.
Yeah, elevated. Well, I mean, it took off, and yeah, I mean, you played a huge part as well as your team, in making that obviously happen. So yeah,
Oh,
not a bad, an awesome
totally.
career chapter. Awesome career chapter.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Did you always have your sights on being a CMO? Or, was there, has there been people, I'm guessing a lot, because I mean, we all start off at, being fairly junior. I mean, we're quite new into it, but I want to sort of understand, have you always been ambitious and driven, or has there been absolutely doubts in your career where you've gone, you know what?
Ah, imposter syndrome is just a thing, right?
Yeah.
We all, well, I have that for sure. I think I was always ambitious where I wanted to be the best I could be in the environment I was in, but the title has never driven me. And in fact, I think the title can be quite misleading sometimes because depending on the size of the company or, the remit you've got, it doesn't quite match the perception of the title that's on your LinkedIn. Um, I I think I've recognized that what I really love doing is being part of a team, embracing, the strengths of the team and I often sort of refer to it as the capability mix of playing to your strengths and matching people up, complementary strengths. And that's where the magic happens. Your team can do that. So I would call myself more of a go-to-market leader,
Yeah.
a team leader. I'm probably more of a strategy slash bigger picture person. I'm not that great at detail, and I recognize that. In fact, people in my team go, Penny, we will check the spelling before that's sent out because you're terrible. And I'm like, I know.
You should acknowledge
Plenty of
that.
strings. But yeah, I certainly, I'm not driven by the title, but I recognize to have the influence and impact I've had, I've had to get myself into positions where I'm part of a leadership team or I'm
Okay.
part of a group that can influence. So that's probably what's driven me more, the people, the project and the ability to influence.
Yeah. And I think I chat to a lot of, leaders, and one thing they always say is, you know what, you just hire really smart people that are smarter than you, that, you can, they can check the detail and, you're in safe hands.
Absolutely. I mean, A players hire A plus players. I've learned that repeatedly. And I have worked with some exceptional people who've gone on one guy I've always loved, he didn't even finish school. He certainly didn't get a marketing degree. And he sort of had this quite scrappy career in sales. And he came across when I was at Xero in a secondment. And I was like, it's just a standout. He's exceptional. We worked together for a few years. We're still friends. He's now a CMO of a massive education tech company in San Francisco.
Yeah.
There are people that you come across in your career and it's actually, that's probably my biggest, proudest legacy actually is giving people an opportunity to go on and do amazing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been fortunate that I've had quite a lot of some really amazing people. Not, of course, there's some not great ones, but
Yeah.
on the whole, they have gone on to do such great, cool, interesting, purposeful things.
Yeah, no. And it gives you really satisfaction. I mean, I've seen that myself when I've managed people, and you kind of go, well, you know what? Everyone's their own person, but I'd like to know that at least I gave them a little bit of confidence or push in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. Lucy. I mean, you've done that for me. You've actually sometimes just having a conversation at the right timing gives you the confidence to either get back in or to take the leap, to actually recognize what's right in front of you. Those pivotal conversations with the right people are, integral to, and you think of that, you look back on those milestones and you're like, I remember having that conversation, result I did X, Y, Z. They're amazing.
Yeah, I love it. What's your, because I mean, I agree. I think nowadays, we see a lot of different titles out there. We see CMO, and, I think, all right, that's interesting. You've been, 3 years in marketing and you're calling yourself CMO, right? Okay. But there's a few in about there. There's a few. But what do you think separates a good CMO in 2026 versus a stellar CMO?
Look, a good CMO is certainly, they've got breadth, not depth. So they understand the remit and, I wouldn't say they're a generalist. They know enough across the disciplines to either attract or retain the right talent or recognise when you need to bring certain people in at the right time. The second part is that they really are lent into the numbers of the business. So I see this repeatedly when marketing plans or strategies, etc., are not connected to the business and the business objectives, etc. So I think that's honestly, connecting yourself to the business numbers as a go-to-market leader is way more important than, your marketing plan.
Yeah.
And it also gives you that seat at the table where you can really, say, you're doing this because it connects to that and the results are why and you contributed to that. I really cannot stand the vanity stats that have been flying around for 1,000 years. I've got X amount of people to the event, I've had X amount of visitors, I've had this, honestly, who cares?
Yeah.
I care about, depending on what your job is it conversion to a customer? Is it the duration of that customer? Is it reducing churn? All those things. They are the things that you should only care about.
Yeah.
And I use the word vanity stat to sort of, ram it home because that's how marketers sort of lose their credibility because they're sort of playing in the fluffy area and it's like, no, you're a business leader, business first. So I think that's probably the areas that I've thought about. And honestly, I probably, and this is maybe the way the luck and the opportunities I've had is that the roles I've taken, the PDs are sort of irrelevant. They evolve constantly. The current role I'm in, my job has changed probably 4 times in a year, and that's a scale up. And I don't even know, my job remit doesn't even exist really. But I look at it and go, okay, what can I do in this moment that is going to make a difference to the business that, will help the business metric? That's where I see my job. You have the opportunity to, in a way, define your job once you get into a company or set up where you actually, make it your own and sort of, I don't wait for the role, sort of design it.
I think it's well said, absolutely. And you're right. I see it myself, the vanity sort of, it's, targeting that. You think, I've got respect for anyone like yourself who, plays a massive increase on engagement across customer data and, is leading that growth. That's the big stuff that people really care about. What advice do you have for marketing managers? There's a few people listening to this that, are in that, say, in-between point in their career. There's a few that I know who, I can tell in the future are going to make really awesome leaders. Is there any kind of wise words or advice you would give those people? Because we're in such a hot bubble bath of change right now. So.
It's tumultuous times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tumultuous. I don't know a marketer at the moment who isn't a little bit overwhelmed. There's certainly a bit of fear. The world of marketing, I get asked constantly by friends whose kids are starting marketing degrees and they're like, should I do it? And I'm like, look, marketing is fundamentally completely changed. It's completely transformed. I would say don't go in with rigid expectations of what marketing is. Be flexible and open-minded. Play to your strengths. Understand and recognise and nurture your strengths. Mine was always creativity, curiosity, challenger, etc. But recognise where your weaknesses are and either work a way to, increase or evolve those weaknesses, or certainly don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be exposed in those weaknesses. Position yourself where your strengths really come to the front. Probably I'd also say is get yourself in an environment and be comfortable. It might be an environment of 10 people, it might be an environment of 10,000 people, but an environment where you feel that you can bring your true self to work. Okay. I'd had a lot of jobs prior to even, honestly, Xero. Xero was probably the first job where I went, oh my God, I can actually be myself here. I can be, bring my authentic self to work. And that's where all of a sudden that I just relaxed and lent into the role, and I had the courage and the permission to sort of, be creative and be bold. So I sort of found my people. And it took me a while to do that. So don't be afraid to just be constantly thinking about where are my people, where do I sort of stay. And then on the flip side, I had sort of had jobs for 2 to 3 years. I had sort of moved around from a career, ambition or aspirations point of view. I'd had kids. I was moving interstate, etc. But when I got to Xero, I was like, I found my people. And so I had 3 roles in 10 years, which is why I stayed for 10 years, because I had 3 roles. So I constantly felt I was evolving, that 10 years was a reasonable stint. I never thought I'd be anywhere for 10 years. So that's probably, I probably rambled on a little bit there, but I think play to your strengths, find your people, find your purpose, what really drives you. And it might be as simple as like, I have a huge ambition to travel overseas every year. Find a place that does that. Or I'm really, sort of driven for, some sort of social enterprise, or I just really want to be stimulated by the latest tech. Everyone's purpose is very individual, so that's totally fine. Lean into people around you, and also don't be threatened by things like the environment I'm in now. I'm surrounded by, brainiacs, AI engineers who just, spitting up stuff all over the place. And I'm like overwhelmed by what's going on. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I go outside, I talk to my colleagues, to, my community, my network. And I'm like, oh my God, I know I'm like streets ahead of everyone else. So that's also that learning that I've had is like, don't just leave yourself in a little bubble. Like think about the environment you operate and the environment that you live in.
Yeah. You mentioned something there and it kind of dovetails nicely to my next question, but network. I said that to a lot of people and sometimes, I hear myself saying it and I think, God, I'm probably going to get another eye roll when I mention that word network. Because, we're all like, yeah, we're trying, Liz, we're trying, but not everyone's naturally as great at it than others. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of leaders right now that are really understanding the power and the importance of their network. Is that something that you've always played a bit of you've kept as a priority alongside your career, or is that, being honest around that?
It's not, it hasn't been a priority consistently through my career. And I think maybe actually that was the problem when I was at Xero. My network within Xero was really good, but outside of Xero, limited. And I quite exposed when I came out of Xero, gave myself, a good sort of decent break and wanted to get back in and went, oh my God, I've been talking to the same people for 10 years. I had not been out there. So I think the network is everything, but the word network is just, people hate it. I get it. And networking events, if you give me a title that says networking event, clearly I'm going to run the opposite direction. Who wants to go to one of those? But I think what I have recognized is find your people, and your people can be, anywhere and everywhere. And it doesn't necessarily have to be through work, but, you'll be having a conversation on the weekend in a social environment and you're like, oh, we're either in the same industry or, there's a connection with what I do and what you do, I think that's this sort of organic network.
Yeah.
And like thing, we should be leveraging our network because it's relationships. And in this world, particularly we've seen it with social online media, we've seen it now with AI, people are becoming even more sort of not negative, but more distrustful of online and social networks and stuff. Face to face is becoming the new black. It's
Big
like
time.
it and it's like, thank goodness, because it's actually having a conversation like you and I are having is 1,000 times more valuable than, me flicking a comment on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would trade 1,000 conversations like this, every time. Yeah, I think the word network is misleading, but I also think that you have to find your people and it just becomes much more natural to you. Don't force it. If you're not an extroverted person, it's awkward and uncomfortable and you hate it. But your network would be in a different environment. Find those people.
Yeah. And I think it's important nowadays to just not take that for granted. I think there's a lot of people that, unfortunately, for whatever reason, are being, made redundant. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, I need to tap into that. So, it's like going to the gym, keep on hustling,
You need to build the muscle up, totally. And I learned that firsthand leaving Xero. I was, not match fit. I really needed to get back into it. And now it's become quite, I'm enjoying it. And opportunities like this I'll take because it's like, hey, I'm extending and leveraging my network, but I'm really enjoying myself as well. So why wouldn't I?
Yeah, I love it. So before we jumped on here, so I did reach out to my lovely network, my lovely community on LinkedIn to say, hey, these are a couple of fabulous CMOs that I'm interviewing. And I did get a question from somebody who sent me an email and basically wanted me to ask this particular question to you. And I actually thought it was a good one. And I was like, God, I really want to ask this question.
Oh my God, I'm intrigued.
So if everything in marketing keeps changing, what's the one skill that will always matter most for leaders and why, in your opinion?
That's a big question. The one skill, I don't know if I'd call it a skill, but I would say EQ. The one thing that, and I'm seeing it even more so in the last year, is to just lead with EQ first, not there's an assumption we're intelligent. There's an assumption we've got to this certain place because, we're intelligent enough and we're skilled and we have certain, attributes, etc. But EQ is something that is going to make you not only stand out, but stay. And if you can go in and read the room, understand what the people in that room need or what's driving them or what's bothering them, what's, fearing them. And marketers are pretty good at that. Like, we do that with our ICPs. What are their drivers? What are their fears? What are their pain points? We sort of automatically do that when we're thinking about targeting. But if you think about that in an environment where you're managing a team or managing a stakeholders or dealing with a customer group or a supply group, etc., if you can take that EQ skill into that environment, the main thing is you understand them. And so you can sort of either mirror what they are looking for or influence what they want. And then, and this is, and I'm a mother, maybe this is sort of comes back to that. Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
I'm constantly floored by how badly people treat suppliers and vendors and stuff. They have this sort of like, oh, I'm the client, so I need to behave like this. No, you don't. It's actually so short-sighted because sure, the vendor will do something for you because you're paying them, but they won't in any way go out of their way for you. They'll never extend, an agreement or, get additional value. If you don't have the EQ to understand what that really important relationship partnership is with the vendor or supplier or, client or whatever, and that is EQ, you don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that I would say is relationships, EQ and relationships, build those relationships. Yeah. They will get you through life and work.
And I think it's really important you've said that. And I get it completely because especially for this generation coming up, a lot of these were schooled in COVID, where they lost a lot of that social interaction, that, big 3-4 years chunk. And I see it sometimes, I get people say, oh, can you speak to my, daughter or son? They're a grad or in marketing, they want to get into it. And I'll always have a conversation, but the ones that are happy to look directly at you and the ones that honestly can articulate themselves, And, I interviewed a guy the other day, it blew me away. He'd put together a 5-minute business plan off his own back, and I'm like, you're going to go far. You are going to go far, because
Yeah.
it's not many that would have the tenacity to do that these days.
I know. And maybe that's it, that tenacity and grit that you need to stand out. And communication. Like, marketers should be good communicators. That is our skill. That is what we do. We are communicating to our, whatever our customer base is or membership, etc. You need to understand what a good and the different levels of communication. And I'm with you. Like, same thing. Someone asked me the other day to speak to to be a referee. And this person sent me a text. They didn't even say, "Hi, Penny." They just sent the instruction, and they didn't sign off who it was from. And I didn't have their text now in my contact. So I guessed who it was, but I was like, wow, you don't even write "Dear Penny" and from X.
Yeah, wow.
It's like basic communication. And I was like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, interesting. But look, Penny, I feel like we could chat for hours. We could probably, get a nice bottle of Pinot and, just yabba, yabba, yabba. But obviously you've got your day ahead of you, and so have I. But thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed catching up with you.
Lucy, thank you. And thank you for being such a champion for the marketing community. Like, what you've achieved in 2 years, since you've set up the business, but also your style, your just generosity. And you're doing things that are way beyond the remit of, an exec recruiter. So, thank you for championing us as well.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Thank you. Remember, the road to CMO isn't always linear. It's filled with challenges, decisions, and moments of transformation. Whether you're charting your course or navigating a career shift, the experiences, wisdom shared today, as with our guests, is invaluable. Thank you for joining us. Keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember that your journey towards becoming a CMO is as much about the destination as it is about the growth you experience along the way. Until next time, continue to innovate, evolve, and carve out your path to CMO.